Bressler was the judge, and she gave Mike the big award for a teapot that was covered with monarch butterflies
That's
that
it.
he
Yeah.
that he made out of wood.
So a friend of mine, Andy DiPietro, we were standing there talking. He says, Floor's going to buy that piece. I'm like, what do you mean? Why would you say that? And he says, well, Floor collects teapots and she absolutely loves butterflies. Had I known, I'd have made it specifically for her, but I didn't know. So just got lucky.
Say hi to
Just got
Andy
lucky.
for me too.
Will do. Will do. Oh, I heard a fella, John, I believe, from Pennsburg. Is that right? Anyway,
Yes, I am from Pennsbury.
I'm not too far from you. I'm here in Quakertown.
Yeah, right around the corner.
Yep. If you're interested, second Tuesday of the month, we have a meeting here in my shop. It's a very cool meeting. We have lots of cool show and tell things going on. There's usually some kind of demo, and it's a very this meeting has been going on for about 38 years. In my shop since 2011, but for 25 years before that in my friend Dave Hardy's basement. So yeah, it's a very cool meeting. You're welcome to come.
Awesome. Thank you.
There you go, John.
So, all right. Anyway, today we're going to do a little box with some textures on it. So here's a couple of examples. This is a little cherry box, and I've gotten some textures started on that one. Same with this one here. This was a little holly box, and this box I just finished this past year, 2023, and I was hired to show a group how to do a box like this with some copper on it and with some stones in it. And really cool project to work on. The guys were great. It was a hands-on workshop. And so this one is also holly.
Can you hold one closer to the camera? I'm having a hard time seeing them.
Sure. Let me zoom in a little bit. You know what? Let me go to a different camera here. Is that better?
Yep.
All right. So
Thank you.
Looks
sure.
very mystical.
Yeah. What I really like about the textures is the way it hides that lid. You don't really see the joint so much. A little bit right here, but mostly it just disappears. And I kind of like that about this texture. So these are turquoise stones that were embedded into the surface. One of the interesting things about turning something like this is that the box wall thickness is pretty heavy. That's probably almost a half an inch. And that's on purpose so that we're able to do the textures and the carvings and things on there so that we don't end up going through. And that makes it turning a little easier. We don't have to be quite so worried about, turning it too thin and getting, going through. You don't have to worry about carving it through now. But anyway, so there's that. This is a piece I've made a couple of years back. This has got a couple of dragons on it. So this dragon work is called, the technique is called repoussé and chasing. And repoussé means to push out. So you can see where the copper actually is pushed out a little bit from the surface there. And there are guys that do repoussé and chasing that are way, way better than this. I saw a fellow once do a frog out of a 6-inch square piece of wood of copper, and he raised that copper up about 3 inches.
Oh.
So, yeah, it was just amazing how you can take a square piece of copper and just make a 3-dimensional frog out of it just by hammering on it. It's really, really incredible. So this piece is going to be for sale at AAW Pop exhibition in May. It's really early this year, isn't it? It's in May out in Portland. And so it has about 11 different faces on there. They're different expressions and things like that. When I first started when I first started to design this piece, I was driving home from Totally Turning, and Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds came on the radio, and I'm just tooling along, driving home, and I'm thinking, I remembered that they think maybe that was written about LSD, and I thought, well, what other letters could we use for those three letters? And I came up with Looking Secretly Demented, and yeah, so these couple of faces here, these three right here, that's where I started. And after I drew those and carved those in here, I thought this is way too creepy. So I couldn't finish with that. So I ended up going with just different kinds of expressions. This is actually the second piece. This was a practice piece for the first one that I made. And I got pretty lucky. This past year up at Totally Turning, Hans Weisflog and I were demonstrating side by side, and I asked him if he would be interested in trading some pieces. So he really liked that first piece, and so I don't know if I got the better deal or not, but I got 3 of Hans' pieces for 1 of mine, so I think I was all right. So anyway, let's get into doing some turning. Let me move these over so we don't knock those down. And I've got a piece of holly here. It's about a 3-inch cube. So we're not going to be making a really big box out of this, but big enough. So in order to do this here, the first thing we're going to do, of course, I'm sure most of you guys have made boxes or at least made things round. And to make this one round, we're going to go with a 1.25-inch roughing tool, roughing gouge. And you might notice that the ends of my tool are ground a little bit differently. And I'll show you what that's for in a little bit.
Why did you pick holly, Mike?
Okay, so the question was, why holly? Holly is really does accept the texture work really well. I think it's one of the better woods for that, for carving and for texturing. It's a tight grain. It's also not real hard. Like poplar is a tight grain. It works fairly decent, but it's a bit harder than the holly. So holly just works better. And as long as you get a fairly decent piece of holly, you can get some really nice details turning it as well, as far as like turning a nice ridge or nice detailed lines. Basswood, if you get a piece of northern basswood from northern Pennsylvania up into New York and farther north, that basswood actually is a fairly decent wood. The basswood that grows here, I actually have some basswood trees on my property. It's softer and a little bit too soft. Box elder is another one. It's a great wood for this technique. The only problem with box elder is more often than not, you've got the bug holes, which isn't necessarily a game changer. It would be something akin to you want to incorporate those holes into your texture work. And I'm the one guy out there that looks for box elder that doesn't have any red in it, because it does work. It does work really, really nicely. Cherry's pretty decent. Cherry's a little harder than the holly, but it works pretty decently. Soft maple's not so bad. And I'll have some of those woods over here where we're doing some of the texture work. I'll show you what some of that looks like.
How about dogwood?
Dogwood would be great. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little harder, but dogwood is one of those, it's really, really hard to get a big piece that's not cracked.
Yeah.
It's pretty unstable wood, yeah. I haven't tried apple, but I'll bet you apple would be pretty good too.
It cracks.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, it's another one, very unstable. No. I have tried walnut, but the porous part of the walnut's not really conducive to that. So something a little bit tighter grain than that. All right, let's get started. Let me know if this sounds okay with the face shield down. I think it should.
Yes, it's good.
So we always want to stand with our feet about shoulder width apart. We'll have the handle down at our hip. And we can use an overhand grip like this, or we can hold it like that. Let's go to this. So we can have an overhand like this here, or an underhand. I prefer overhand most of the time, but not always. And what speed do we want? Faster is usually better, but the best answer for speed that I've heard, it sounds a little flippant, but it actually works pretty well, is dial your lathe up until you get scared and back off a little. If you get scared at 800 RPM because your piece is a little bit out of balance, you're going to back off. You're not going to be quite as tense because you're not as afraid to turn the wood. If you're comfortable spinning it faster, you're going to get a better cut. But there again, make sure that your wood is going to be capable of those speeds. I had a piece of wood on the lathe 25 years ago or so with a bark inclusion, and I turned the speed up pretty far, and a big chunk of it came flying off and put a hole in that wall over there. So, I mean, you do have to be careful about it as well.
What were the dimensions on that to start with?
1 second. I'm going to see if I can turn my volume up here. Because I'm not quite hearing. Well, I guess my volume is up. All right. We're going to do the best we can that way.
The
What was the
question
question?
was, what are the dimensions of your chunk of wood?
Okay, this is a 3-inch cube.
Thank
So
you.
it's 3 inches by 3 inches by 3 inches. All right, here we go. I generally make most of my boxes for this texture work into a cylinder, but you don't have to. I like the cylinder because it's just easier to demonstrate the textures on there. If I want to start with a drawing, I can make the drawing on a flat piece of paper and wrap it around the cylinder. All right, so the reason for this grind on the side of my tool is for putting tenons on. So we just turn this tool over sideways, and we can cut that tenon right in there. I can't do it over here because the chuck's in the way.
That's a cool move. I like that.
Oh, yeah, that's something that I picked up from a guy that I knew a bunch of years ago. He was my mentor really for about 30 years, Dave Hardy. I seen his tool and it was sharpened like this. Let me see if we can get a better view of it. It was sharpened like this. Just basically, it was just the metal on the side of the tool was just ground back. Not so much to make a sharp edge here, just to get this excess metal out of the way. And that way, in a production point, from a production point of view, you rough out your piece, you turn the tool over, you get your tenon on and pop it out of the lathe, and you keep right on moving. It's a really good way to get your production up a little bit quicker. It's a little time saver. All right, so another thing too, if you have a spur center like this, or a multi-spur center for the Morse taper, a lot of times they'll come with a little groove right here. You can put that right into your 4-jaw chuck, and you don't have to buy a special multi-spur center designed for these chucks. You just put it right down into the where the chuck comes close together, holds it perfectly. Okay, someone has their mic on.
I
and
just
think they're
muted
opening
them.
a bag of candy.
I just muted them.
Okay, good. I mean, if they're not going to share. All right, so I'm going to put a tenant on this end, and then I'm going to start with the making the box. So the way I like to do this is I like to start with the lid in attached to the chuck. So I'm going to take a narrow parting tool. This one is a Robert Sorby 16th inch. And I'm just removing as little wood as possible, which is why the narrow parting tool. The one thing you don't want to do is just push your tool straight in. You want to go a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, back and forth. And it doesn't have to be twice the width of your tool. It just has to be wider than the tool. Because if you're rubbing on both sides of the tool, going to create too much friction, and it's going to damage the tool, and it might actually pull the tool out of your hand. All right, I meant to catch that one. Better luck next time. Okay, so this is the lid. We're going to leave that attached. We're going to move the tool rest a little closer. I want to be below center by a little bit. And basically what I'm going to do here is just turn a little bowl. And so there's a number of ways we could do that. I've always used a little 1/4 inch bowl gouge just because I like it. The 1/4 inch bowl gouge is we're going to be cutting in the wrong direction. Technically, I should be starting from the center and coming out. Generally speaking, I almost always get a decent cut. You can see that this is a little bit tore out. So this piece of holly was a little softer, maybe a little bit far gone, a little farther gone than it should have been. So we might not get as great a cut inside here, but we'll see. First thing I want to do is true up this the lip here a little bit. And then just start hollowing this bowl out. Now, I don't want to take a lot of material out of here because I kept the lid kind of short. So I'm just going to go fairly shallow with that so that I can keep closer to my 3/8 to a 1/2 inch wall thickness. Now I've got this just a little square-ended scraper. I'm going to use that to make the mortise here. We can make this center part a little bit wider. I'm not going to go any deeper, but just a little wider. Feels like it cut really well. Let's see if we can get a little closer view there. Yeah, there's almost no tear out here. So even though I'm cutting against the grain, it just cuts really, really nicely. Now you can see here a little bit of tear out from the scraping tool. So what I'm going to do with that is take a small spindle gouge, just a 3/8 spindle gouge. That one hasn't been sharpened. Let me see if I have another one here. There we go. Got a nice sharp edge on it. And I'm just going to take and cut out this direction a little bit just to clean that edge up a little. That's nice. That's nice. Now what I want to do is I want to check this, be sure that from here to here is flat. So I need a little straight edge. Let me back this camera out just a little bit. From this view, we can see there's a little gap out here. So my center section's a little bit high. Yeah, that's better. If for some reason you have a hard time getting those two flat, there's a trick that we could use. And I basically use this for when I'm doing platters and things. Now this has got some 100 grit paper on here, so I'm not going to use it. But you just take a piece of wood, put some sandpaper on there, and then just hold it up against there. It's going to sand it perfectly flat. So what I would do now is I would sand this up a little bit, and then I would go ahead and put some finish on that on the inside. That would be, then the inside of this lid would be done and ready for working on the
Mike,
outside. Yes,
Can you lower your camera angle a little bit? You're off the bottom.
you're right. Yeah, hang on just a second.
A little more.
Keep going.
We probably won't use that one too much
Okay.
because then it cuts my head off. And that's supposed to be my face on shot. It's supposed to be me looking at you guys.
Alright.
So we'll probably use a different angle anyway. So anyway, that's done. We could put that aside. And we've already got the tenon on the other half of this. You see, I'm using my thumb to press that in there. The reason for that is if I was pushing in with my hand, I can push it sideways a little bit, maybe without realizing it. If I push with my thumb in the center, it's always got even pressure. And I use this technique for anytime I'm putting something in a chuck, whether it's a bowl or a vessel or this. Always just push right in the center. And if you just use your thumb for that, it gets even pressure and gets set down in there just right. All right, so the next task now, I want to flatten this surface, and then I want to put on my tenon to fit this mortise. Having a pair of vernier calipers with a little lock screw on there, it's great. You don't have to really, the numbers are hard to read. You don't hear the little lines because they're so close together, but we don't really have to worry about reading them. We just have to make sure that this inside measurement matches this outside measurement on here. So we'll flatten that surface just a little bit. And we're going to take some of that off anyway. Now we can eyeball this this wall thickness right here. We can kind of eyeball that to get it close. And then we'll start measuring it. Now you see, I went a very, very shallow cut there. Actually, it's still a little bit more shallow than what I've got here. I didn't really put much of a mortise, a depth in here anyway, so. We can see here, I've got to go 1/16 of an inch yet. When you recheck your tenon, now I've only got a 3/32 of an inch of a tenon here. I still cut that in half. That way I could gauge how much I'm taking off. If you take off the whole thing, that's pretty close, but not quite yet. It's hard to tell how much you've taken off. So if you just use half of that tenon, then you can tell. When we're getting down to this point, it's really just a matter of trial and error. With the vernier caliper, when you're checking that, it's kind of it's not sharp, but it's kind of a knife edge here. And you could actually make it fit by pressing a little bit too hard, but it's still, that doesn't mean that it's going to actually fit your lid. What I want to look for here is a fairly snug fit. I want it to be like that. That way I can finish turning the top of the lid without needing to hold it on some other way because I made it too loose. And that's just about perfect. The only thing I want to do now is I want to check for depth. So we can take the vernier caliper again and check the depth of my mortise here and use that to check the height of the tenon. It's just about perfect. And this shoulder is a little bit rounded. So I need to take some of that shoulder off back inside here a little bit, closer to the tenon. All right, that's pretty close. There's a bit of a dark line here, and there shouldn't be too much of a dark line. It should fit better than that. So I'm gonna have to take a little bit off yet. Make those two surfaces mate a little bit closer. There's two reasons why that might not be, why we might get that little wet black line. One of them is that the surface that I'm working on here doesn't match the surface of the lid, or this tenon might be just a hair too long. So I'm going to take the tenon down a little bit as well, just in case it's the tenon. Yeah, that's a lot better. There's still a little bit of a line there, but I think we're going to be okay with that. So now, before I go any farther on the bottom of the box, I want to finish the lid. So we'll bring the tailstock up against. And we'll make the lid fit the box. And finish off the top of the lid. So this is just a 1/2 inch spindle gouge. Because we're going to texture this, we don't have to make sure that we have a perfect cut. You can see where that lid just about completely disappeared there. That's pretty good. I'm happy with that. I generally put a little bit of a dome on the lid. Don't know that I have to do that, but I generally do that. I like that that look. Now, before I just remove the tailstock, I want to be sure that it stayed snug. You can see where that joint just about completely disappeared there. It's really nice. I like that. So that's still, it's a little bit looser than I would like, but it's pretty snug. I think I'll be able to take that off there without putting some tape on here. If you do get a little bit loose, there's two things you can do with that. You can take a piece of tissue paper and slide this, push the tissue paper between the two and slide this on. That will tighten it up. The other thing is you slide this on and wrap it up with tape around this edge, and that will hold it in place while you cut that little nub off. Either way works.
Do you remember what Hans calls that?
No, I don't.
He calls it French because it's Toulouse.
Hans is good for that. Yeah, I like it. The third option is you cut gently while you're pressing with the bevel against the lid. So you can hold it in place. I'm a little bit high with this. I have to lower it down. But you can hold the lid in place if it's not too loose, just with the tool itself while you're cutting it off. There we go. So if we were making a box that we weren't going to texture, I would sand this lid up and I would put finish on all the way down to the box portion of it. And then that lid, since we put finish on the inside, that lid would be completely done then. That was a nice fit. That was about perfect. Sometimes they get so tight you can't get them off. If that happens, what you're going to want to do is take a rag of some sort, towel or something, and while the lathe is spinning, heat up the lid with that towel, that rag, and that will cause the wood to expand a little bit. And before it cools, you can pop it off. That makes taking that off doable. Okay, let's see. I was going to go with a 2 1/4 inch drill bit. I'm not now because my tenon is about 2 1/4 inches, so I would lose my tenon altogether. So let me grab another tool here. So if you ever get a chance to buy some drill bits with Morse tapers on it, go ahead and do that. They are awesome. They're really, really helpful. They're quick. You don't need a chuck. It keeps things closer. You don't have, like, especially if you've got a shorter lathe, you get the chuck in there and then the drill bit. Sometimes you don't have room. I remember that when I had a little Jet 1220. There just wasn't enough room to have longer, the drill chuck and the drill bit. So these are great. And you can buy them brand new. There's a flea market near me and I find them there every once in a while. All right, so I want to check how deep I want to go and put a mark on my drill bit. I want to go about 1 7/8, I believe. Let me check that again just to be sure. Yeah. 1 7/8. I don't know that you'll be able to see that mark. It's right here. So yeah, you can see that.
Do you ever sharpen your old twist bits?
I do. Yep. Yeah, they
Yeah.
kind of need it. If you buy an old one in particular, it's probably not very sharp.
That's what I figured.
The
How-
bigger ones are easy to sharpen because you can just see that surface. When you get down to like 1/8 of an inch drill bit, it's just
Yeah.
easier to go buy another one.
How do you do it?
I just do it by eye on the grinder. That was something taught to me by my mentor as well. He was a machinist forever. So he showed me how to do that. He actually showed me how to sharpen brad point bits too on the grinder. So, all right. I generally drill about 400. Yeah, these drill bits are really, really nice. So now hollowing this out, we've got a couple of options. One option is going to be putting the lathe in reverse and cutting on the opposite side with a bow gouge. Let's try this one. Now, the thing about using a bow gouge in reverse, we actually get a pretty decent cut. Let's see if we can get a view of that cut in there. It's not terrible. This being a cylinder, we're cutting along the grain. We're cutting right into end grain towards the bottom of the cut. So we're down at the very base of this cut, it's not going to be good. But cutting down the side of the box, it's going to be a fairly decent cut, almost as if we were cutting out here. The same kind of a cut we can get. So for this kind of a box, it's actually pretty useful to do that. When we get down towards the bottom of the box, we can put the lathe, the tool in this orientation, whereas the flute is about 45 degrees up on an angle. The bevel on the bottom of the tool is square to the lathe, and I'm cutting straight out towards the side of the box. Now, if we get into a deeper box, this won't work. See, we've got a couple of steps here. I don't want to take this tool all the way out to the sidewall because I'll be scraping on the sidewall then, and that scraping will give me tear out. I'm going to put this in forward and turn the tool around. Maybe you can see the way I'm cutting in here. Maybe not, because my hand's probably going to end up being in the way, but
Oh, you're good. We can see it.
So when you see this cut like this, you can see why having the lathe in reverse would be better. This is really like no control because the handle is so far away from my body. If I put this lathe in reverse, then it's very ergonomic. This hand is right here in my side, and I can just operate that tool just the way it was meant to be operated.
Mike, did you have to lock that chuck in order to do the reverse?
Yeah, you should. Now, I always lock my chucks anyway. Many years ago on my general lathe over here, I had a fairly big piece of wood on there, and the general does not have that groove here for set screws. Anyway, I shut the lathe off, and I did not have the chuck drove home, as they would say. You just drive that chuck home. I didn't do that, and when I stopped the lathe did stop, but the piece of wood just unwound, and I'm there getting ready to catch this big piece of wood, you know. So it's, yeah, either lock it down with the set screws or jam the chuck on really hard. Some of the lathes, like I said, they don't have that groove for the set screws, so you just have to jam the chuck real hard. The other reason that I turn the set screws in is because if I don't, over time, they end up over there on the other side of the shop. And I've lost a few of them because I wasn't tightening them down. So,
Thanks.
yep. All right, so my last cut now, I'm going to cut that along the side, clean this up. I'm going to do that in reverse again. When you get to the bottom of the bowl or the bottom of the box, you do want to be careful. You're coming down the side of the box like this. When the end of the tool or the bottom of the tool contacts the bottom of the box, it's going to start getting a lot more friction, going to want to grab. So you want to be careful not to go too deep on the very bottom. At the bottom, you want to make that last cut across the bottom towards the outside wall.
Question, Mike.
Yes.
If you were doing a taller box and couldn't do it that way, what would your next tool of choice be?
That would be this ring tool.
The old ring tool trick.
Yep, termite tool is great. I used to recommend Andre Martel's hook tool, and I can't find them anymore. So somewhere along the line, I don't know if I dropped my tool, if I lent my tool out, whatever, my Andre Martel hook tool broke. And anyway, that tool, I don't know if I have, I was able to find a large one, and I haven't used this large one yet. Let's see if we can get an overhead view of this. But you can see, so this would get mounted into a handle, and the geometry of this hook tool is that it's at an angle compared to the handle, whereas Michael Hoslick's hook tool, the hook is straight out from the end. And this tool here, when you get that in the work, you can do a bevel rubbing cut coming out. So that would be on the inside like that. So you can use a bevel rubbing cut like almost all the way around. Now, like I said, I haven't used this larger one yet. The smaller one, which I used quite frequently, the first time I saw him use that up at Totally Turning a bunch of years ago, I'm like, there's a guy who knows exactly what that tool needed to be. And unfortunately, he's not selling them. I don't know why.
Yeah. You can use the other end. You can use the end in the other direction and use it as a drill too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Very versatile tool. So you've used it?
Yeah, I have. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
My little
tool.
one still exists. I haven't sharpened it into oblivion yet.
Yeah. Well, that is the other thing. It is a little bit tricky to get them sharpened. They have a special diamond grinder for it. Not that big a deal, but you do have to do it. So the other option, if you don't have the termite tool, is a round nose scraper. Now this one is an easy wood tool with a carbide cutter on the end. You can use that or just a normal round nose scraper. The problem with that is, like, especially with this piece of wood, it's a little bit softer. I'm not getting as good a cut. The scraping tool is not going to work as well.
Why didn't you just go to a smaller Forstner bit?
A larger Forstner bit,
Smaller.
smaller.
You said the 2 1/4 was too big.
Oh,
So
right,
why
right.
didn't you just step down to a smaller one?
Right now, lazy. I would have had to go over there and find one and pull one out.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, normally I would use the largest drill bit that I could and still have like enough room to do one final pass, because the drill's not going to give you a great cut either. But no, I would absolutely drill it out as large as I could so that I have enough room to make one final pass. But this gives us a way to see how else to do that if, just you're using a different kind of a drill bit. Okay. I've got a little bit in the corner. You probably won't be able to see that too well, but maybe. Like right down in the very bottom corner there, there's a little bit of a
Yeah, we
lip
can see
there.
it.
So let's see if we can cut that out. A little bit from the bottom, a little bit from the side till we get down in the corner. Oh, the other thing, I probably made this corner too sharp. There's still a little bit of wood down in there. You can see that little lip. I generally don't like to go with square corners on the bottom of boxes. The reason for that for me is I can't sand those corners. It's really hard to sand a square corner down there. Yeah, you can get a piece of wood and wrap some tape or paper around that. But if you make that corner with a cove, it's just a whole lot easier to sand. And depending on what you're putting in there, it probably doesn't matter that you have a rounded corner as opposed to a square corner. It just is easier to deal with from a sanding point of view. Okay. All right, so that's it. That's the box. Now, the thing that we could do next, or what I would do next, would be to take off the tenon. And because I'm going to texture the outside of this, I could grab that right here and put a couple of chuck jaw marks on there. Won't hurt anything because I'm going to texture it anyway. If you're going to just make a finished box and you're not going to texture it, what I would do then was I would basically make, all right, I'd basically make another lid, just a jam chuck that was the same configuration as the inside of the lid. Put that in here, jam this into that, and then cut that tenon off. But because we don't have to worry about that, we're going to texture this. I'm actually not going to bother doing that right now because I do want to finish sanding the inside of this, and nobody wants to watch that. That's a pretty good fit. I like that. It's not too tight that I won't be able to get it apart later. If it was a little bit tighter to finish the lid, that'd be okay, as long as you can get it off the box. If it was that much tighter though, when you're done turning the lid, you're going to want to take a little bit off of that tenon so that it's not quite so tight. I generally like them if they're a little loose anyway. When I pick up a lid, I want the lid to come off. I don't necessarily want the whole box to come up in the air like that. but for turners, I know we all want to see how that lid fits really snug and perfect and nice. And, you know, for these kind of boxes, they're probably not going to get things put in them anyway. They're probably just going to get looked at. This is a good fit. So, all right, that's it for turning a box. Let's go over to this other station, and I want to change one of these cameras here so that I can have a face-on view when I'm sitting here. Let's see. If I'm here,
Tools.
it'd be nice if I had 6 more cameras and they were all set up just where they needed to be. Unfortunately, we live in a world where that's not possible. So let's wide angle that. And we'll go up a little. That's pretty good. And maybe we'll go up just a little more yet. And we don't need that.
You don't want to keep the smoke out of your eyes?
We have probably, let's see if we can back this other one up. Unfortunately, my camera switcher is not anywhere nearby either, but okay, so this unit here is a Tornado 1000. Let's see, I'm gonna wiggle this around a little bit, try not to get seasick. The Tornado 1000, it's a dust collector and it pulls a lot of the smoke out. It's not a smoke collector, but if you look over here on this side, it's black. That is an activated charcoal filter. Let's come back towards where I'll be working. So I found these things online somewhere, and it's activated charcoal filters, and they look like this. So they're just black filter. What I do is I cut them to fit the out feeds on my dust collector. And that takes a lot of the visible smoke out of the air. It doesn't get all of the smell out, but it does get a lot of the physical smoke out. So it's quite helpful. And before I had this, I was just carving, just burning away. And you'll see when I get these cut burrs out that creates a lot of smoke. It's, I worked out here for half a day just with cut burrs, and I had 2 feet of smoke in my 10-foot ceiling down from the ceiling. And I thought, okay, this is probably not a good idea. So I opened up the windows, of course, and got all that out. And then I started using this Tornado 1000. There's other people make dust collectors. You could probably make your own. This filter in the front is, yeah, the filter in the front here is just a like a furnace filter. It works great. As a matter of fact, it works so good, I got to take it outside and beat the dust out of it when I'm carving. It just really gets that full of dust. So it's a good thing. It is a little loud, and you guys let me know if it's too loud, as I also have a little fan here. If that's too loud, I'm just going to use this little fan to blow the smoke away for now. All right, so anyway, let's get down to some texturing and move this a little bit more into plane here. All right. So sometimes my texturing is going to be some carving like this. I don't know, is that better or worse? All right, anyway, so this is the bat. If you know me at all, you know that I am or was a caver. And I like bats. I sell things to cavers, art related work to cavers, and this is one of the things I like to do. You'll notice there's a little hole here. I took a piece of white stone and that's going to be a little raised moon for the bat to be flying around. So that's one of the things that we could do. This one just has some line work on it. And I generally like to start with some kind of line work, burnt in line work. And there's our just burnt with a hot knife.
How did you make that flat bottomed hole?
For this.
Yeah, no, the hole. How did you, I mean, you didn't do that with a drill bit, obviously.
Oh, this hole. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, hand carved.
Ah,
So I rounded the stone first. I drew that profile on there. And then with a little rotary tool, something like this. This is a little end mill,
yeah.
1/8 inch end mill. And I would just gently work up to that. So it's all by hand, all by eye. I imagine if this was perfectly round, which it's not. So if you look on the bottom, there's a little pencil line there, and there's a pencil line here. It's because it's not perfectly round. So I know that when this goes back in there, I line up those two lines, drop it in place, and when I'm ready to, of course, that'll get glued in there. But I'm not quite ready for that. I probably can't see it, but maybe you can. The edges of this are rounded a little bit, but they don't round all the way down to the woodwork. So I want to round that more. I want it to be more dome shaped, more moon shaped, if you will. So that's what I'll do with that. There's another one here. This is something I've just started working on with these little stones. So here's another piece of stone and another little recess. And so that'll go snap down in there. That'll get glued in place then. The one I showed you earlier with the turquoise, I did that one first, and then I started working on some of these. There was one back here that has a little piece of wood, and I think I already started with this. I'm gonna make, I don't know what shape I'm gonna make that little knob into yet, but that'll get attached in there, and I'll make that into something.
When you
Just
glue
things
the
I've been playing around
stone,
with.
excuse me,
Pardon?
when you glue the stone to the wood, what kind of glue do you use?
E6000. So E6000 is a flexible glue. It's a little bit like E6000 is a little bit like caulking in that it's flexible, but it glues to anything. I fixed some pretty heavy duty things with that, and I know people that use it for jewelry, so it works really well.
We used to have some that was called RTV.
Oh, I've heard of it. Yeah, I haven't used
Yeah.
it.
Or
I haven't
shoe
used
goo. You can use shoe goo.
Shoe goo too is another one. And I think you could just use caulk as well, a clear caulk, because that's gonna what you need is a way to attach it without it being rigid, because wood moves back and forth. Stone does too, actually, but not nearly as much. And so because the two different materials change shape um, to each other, then that's how the hard glues like super glue would end up cracking and they'd end up falling out. So you want something that's going to be a little bit more flexible. All right, so this is a piece that I've been working on for a while. Let me zoom in here, get a little closer look. And so what I do, I call random with rules. And what that means to me is everything happens kind of randomly, but there are certain rules that keep that randomness looking like Mike's work, if that makes sense. So when you look at things that I make, there's a certain pattern, even though it's random, that makes that work look more like my work and not like someone else's. And if you pick up anything from this, that's one thing I'd like you to think about is random is good because it's not random is not necessarily like a magic pill. It's not going to, everything you do is not going to be good. But if you try to make a pattern like a chevron shape, or a basket weave or something like that, and you're off a little bit, it's really easy to see that that pattern is not where it should be. But with random, it's hard to be wrong. It's really hard to be wrong. And so I like that about this. I like that I can do things. Now, this one in particular is going to end up being kind of ocean-like. So we've got some things like trilobites. Of course, there's a feather here. I guess you might find a feather in the ocean, but you know, maybe not. So these are like little stingrays maybe coming at you. And then we've got worm trails, like this one is like a worm trail. Let me come in a little bit closer here. And just interesting different kinds of patterns that you might find on the ocean floor maybe. And this was just practice all the way around, but the more I do with it, the closer it's looking towards something like that, something like an ocean scene, the ocean floor. But anyway, let's get into doing some textures. So generally when I start out with some curved lines. And they don't really have to be anything. They're just curved lines. They're just there to set the pace, the tone of the piece. And because our hands pivot on our wrist, it's easier for us to make curves that curve away from our hands. So low point here, a low point here, and it curves outward. Whereas like a curve like this is not as easy to do because it's curving towards, like more towards your body. So if I was going to do this, I would just turn this around and then I can come up here and you'll see that I'm making a bunch of smaller lines to create one line. And there's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, was it Michael Mode maybe? He says, you just keep putting a bunch of little lines until you get the line you want. And and then you erase all the rest. And actually that's what I do. That's really how much this works out or how easy this works out. You just start putting some curves in. If you're coming off of a curve that you already have, you want to come off on a tangent, which means the definition of tangent, I can never remember that, but what I know about it is that we don't want to come off a square off like that, or even an angle off. You want to come off more in line with the curve that was already there. And so this has got a little bit of an issue right here, so we can kind of straighten that curve out a little bit, or not straighten it out, but bend that curve a little bit nicer. If you make boats, there's a term they use as fair curves. And if this is what we're looking for, nice fair curves. We want that same thing when we're turning a bowl or something. We always want to have what will be considered a fair curve. And that's just a nice flowing line. Okay, so there's some lines. Now, the thing we're going to do with that is take a knife tool. Here's a good one. And so I make my own tools, my own tips. Just because, I don't know, I just do that. You can buy a lot of knife tips. I do buy some, but I make most of what I have. One of the reasons I make them is because when I need one, I usually need it right now. And it's just easy for me to bend a piece of wire over, hammer it with a hammer, sharpen it up, and put it in the tool. Instead of going in online and looking about where I could buy them and send for them and then have them shipped in. This is just, for me, it's just easier. So my power unit, let's see if we can get a picture of that with this other camera. Yeah, down here, you can just about see that, I guess. So that is Avalon Concepts Corporation Foam Sculpting Detail Station. It's kind of almost irrelevant for me to tell you that because they don't make them anymore. But if you can find one on eBay or somewhere, they are the nicest power units for wood burning that I've ever found. I found the first one, I have two of them. The first one I found at a flea market near here, and it was like 40 bucks. And I was thinking, I'll bet that's the same thing as a wood burning unit. And so I risked the $40. I brought it home and I fell in love with it. It just really works nice. So the address is on here. It's from Leesport, Pennsylvania, which is only about an hour from me. And they are no longer in business, or they sell cars or something. I don't know what it is, but they don't sell these anymore. So if you can find one, really, really nice tool to have. Really nice tool to have. Otherwise, Burn Master is pretty decent. Coldwood, I hear, is okay. I can't vouch for that. If you want something that gets really hot, build yourself a Graham Priddle wood vaporizer. There's somewhere on the internet, there's a way, a set of instructions on how to make those. And I have one of those. I made a few of those over the years, and they're actually quite useful too, but they're bigger and a little bit more bulky. And plus you have to, make one. So, all right, let me get to the other camera here again. Unfortunately, my camera switcher is not right next to me over here. The trials and tribulations of small shop business. All right, let's get a little closer. There we go. So, tip's pretty hot. Now, there's a couple of ways we can make these curves. We can go straight down the center. So there's a fair amount of smoke there. I'm going to turn on this dust collector. Let me know if that's too loud. If it is, I will turn the fan on instead.
Can't hear it.
Can't hear it?
Cannot hear it.
Right. Zoom takes care of it.
Good, good, good. So you can see the dust going right over, the smoke going right over there. It's going in that direction. Yeah, it's nice. I like the way that works. Anyway. So this is one way to do this. Just a straight down cut in the center. And this piece of wood I'm working on is holly. And then what I'll do is I'll go with a different knife now, a little bit wider tool. So this one is kind of paddle shaped. Let's see if we can get a little closer look. Pretty bright red. So it's rounded on the end. Let's see, where are we at here? There we go. It's rounded on the end, and it's also rounded from left to right. So it's kind of almost spoon shaped, almost. So we're going to take that and hold that on its side and make a V groove out of this first original cut. And you can see that ash on there. We want to get that off. So keep a little wire brush handy, a soft bristle brass brush. Say that 6 times fast. When the carbon builds up on the tool like that, it creates an insulating barrier between the hot knife and the wood, and then it doesn't burn as well.
Was that a brass brush?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really soft, fine bristle brass brush. And for cleaning off your tool, it could be a little stiffer, but I also use that brass brush to brush the carbon off the wood. And if it was too stiff, it would scratch the wood. As a matter of fact, some woods, like when I do some basswood, every once in a while I'll use basswood. If I do basswood, I'm going to use a horsehair brush like this. And that will get most of the carbon off without damaging the wood. The brass bristle will get more of the carbon off, but it will also scratch a softer wood. The scratches might not matter depending on, the kind of textures you're putting on, but generally speaking, I'd rather not have them. So this is basically a V groove. And so that's a texture. It's the beginning point of this process. The next method. Now the holly is stiff enough that we don't really get a whole lot of scratch marks on there. But there are some. So maybe we'll just go back to using the horsehair brush. But anyway, that's the one technique. The next one will be making a raised V. And so instead of holding this knife straight up and down on the pencil line, I'm going to hold it at an angle out away from the pencil line and create half of that V. You can see that ash building up on there. Then I'm going to come back the other side and do the same thing. I'm going to hold it out away from the line, and on an angle, I'm going to pull it backwards. So with a hot knife like this, it's actually a little bit like working with clay. I kind of like that. I think it's a pretty cool technique. I didn't invent it. I know Jack Vessery's been using this carving technique for a while. Derek Weideman is using it. And I actually started out as a wood carver back in 1981, and everything I did back then was with sharp edge tools, knives, chisels, gouges, things like that. And I had bought a power carver way back in the day, back in the 80s. And because I started out as a sharp edged carver, it really took me a while to want to use power carving. And pretty much that's all I do now. Not completely, but most projects that I do are better if I do them with power. You probably see that I'm actually turning the block of wood while I'm doing this, turning the block of wood, and the knife a bit. And that's actually a really good way to get nice curves. All right. So that's two ways of getting curves put in. Now, these are kind of rough right now. What I would do, I'll do a little bit right here, right now. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna back the power off a bit so that the knife's not so hot. What I'm then gonna do is go back, put my visor down so I can see a little bit better. And because I'm kind of a stickler for details, I want to make sure that this raised V is as nice as it can be. The curve looks good, the surface looks good, and I'm basically troweling off that surface. And I actually think about it like troweling because I was a stonemason for 28 years, I'm sorry. And so I know how to use a trowel, and I see it that way. I see it as troweling those high spots down. You can think about it in other ways too, but the point is make sure that you are being particular about what you do. If you want museum grade work, you got to work for it. You got to make it look good. You got to put the time and effort into it. All right. So that's another way of getting a V, or using these curves, like raised V, a recessed V. We could do a couple of other different things. Let's get into doing some cut burrs. Now, cut burrs are, let's go a little wider here. These are cut burrs. They are 15 millimeters for the largest one I have, all the way down to like a 0.5 millimeter for that one. I generally don't use the real small ones. These three here, I generally don't use. They are 1.5, 1 and 1.5, or something like that. They're so small. The reason I don't use those is because the wood, most of the woods are too soft, and that little cut burr ends up being more of a drill than leaving a little bead there. What we want to do is we want to leave these beads there. So I would start with the largest cut burr that I would use on a project. And I generally don't use the real big ones anymore. Just because they take a lot more effort. They actually, I would actually run this with a hand drill, because they're so big. This Oz Plus will definitely run that tool, just not nearly well enough. I feel like I'm overworking the tool, and this is probably the strongest tool out there on the market. Oh, by the way, I don't get anything from this, but I was talking with Tree Line the other day. I'm going to be doing a class out in. I'm going to be doing a class in Indiana, and I'm going to be doing this kind of work out there. So I told PJ from Tree Line, I don't know if you guys ever get his catalog, but I told him that I wanted to tell the students to get the Oz Plus because I really like it. I think it's the tool to own for doing this kind of work. And he said, yeah, that'd be great. He says, if you tell your students to mention Michael's name, my name, they'll give you like $50 off. So if you were ever thinking about getting one of these, just mention my name and he'll give you some money off. That's what he said. So I haven't heard anyone that has done it yet. So I don't know. I think it works, but I don't know. Anyway, that's a great tool. It's strong and it's going to do what we needed to do here today. So I'm going to start with an 11 millimeter. That's about as big as I want to go with this tool. And if you thought the wood burning pen was smoky, this is going to be really smoky. One of the things that you have to keep in mind is the larger the cup burr, the thicker your walls have to be. One of the reasons we keep the walls thick on those boxes. This 11 millimeter cup burr means I need to have a wall thickness that's more than 5.5 millimeters thick. Because this is a half a dome, a half a sphere. So at 11 millimeters, 5.5 millimeters in thickness is going to just go through. So you're going to want at least 6 or 7 millimeters, be on the safe side. So one of my rules for cup burrs is I start with the largest one that I'm going to use on that project. And I don't put a lot of them in. I put fewer of those in than anything. I space them out. You can see that smoke. It really does a heck of a job of smoking up the place. Oh, one thing I haven't talked about yet is sharpening. So these cup burrs need to be sharpened. Let me get a little bit closer here. The rim of this, I'm going to clean it off. Oh, yeah, by the way, these do get carbon built up in them. So you take a really old crappy brass bristle brush and clean the carbon out. If you don't, what ends up happening is your little beads get a groove around there because there's a hunk of carbon stuck in the end of that. So I don't know if you'll be able, I think right there you can see, can you see the teeth on the end of this?
Yep.
When you buy these, the teeth aren't showing up. So the inside of each one of these cup burrs has got grooves in there. And those grooves are teeth, because these are actually meant for rounding over wires for jewelry, and somehow or another they're used for setting stones in jewelry. I don't know about anything about that. I don't do jewelry. I just know that that's what they're for. That's the reason they created these tools. But anyway, when you buy them, this diameter, this outside diameter of right now it's 11 millimeters. When you buy them, the outside diameter is probably closer to 12 millimeters on this one, which means there's a flat edge around the rim. And I used these just like that for about 1.5 years because no one else was using them and I didn't know any better. But when you try to put that into the wood, because that surface is flat, it would skip around. It wouldn't go into the wood. So it took me 1.5 years to get smart and grind this outside diameter down. So what you would do with that is hold that against the grinding wheel. Let me take one over to the grinder here. Let's see. So while the grinder is spinning, you'll hold this in a micromotor. You need a motor to drive it that has good bearings in it. I tried it with a cheaper model. What are they? Dremel. I tried it with a Dremel tool, and the bearings in the Dremel tool vibrate a little bit. So when you hold it against the grinder, this gets ground out of round. I tried grinding them in a hand drill. It's because I was too lazy to move my carving tool over to where my grinder is, and so I'm just going to hold it in the power drill. The bearings in that are not good either. So what happens when this gets out of round? You get it sharp, but because it's not centered on the shaft, it skitters around. It's worse than if you hadn't done anything to it. So you do have to sharpen it with a micromotor. And any of the micromotors I think are good enough for that. Could be, the $200 RAM or this Oz Plus is like $650 or something. or NSK is another good one. Those all have pretty decent bearings, and you can sharpen them with that. Once they're sharp, then you could use this in a hand drill, a DeWalt hand drill or something, and it would work fine because it's centered now. And once you contact the wood, it'll remain centered even though the bearings aren't great. But if it's ground out around, won't work. So you're going to hold this in the handpiece while that's spinning. I generally don't hold it straight on like that. I generally hold it on an angle like that. The outside of the tool is basically square to the wheel so that the sides end up kind of square. What you don't want to do is angle it like this and sharpen it like a chisel. If you do that, you end up having to push that metal into the wood harder because that angle on the outside is not cutting. It's just pushing into the wood. So anyway, if you got any questions about that, let me know. I've got a really short video that I could send. It's on my computer in the house. If you think about it, let me know and I'll email it to Susan or Kent, and they can email it out to you. It's really, I don't see it as all that necessary, but it does give you an idea what's going on. It's just a little short video of this thing spinning on the grinder. But once the teeth that are inside the cup burr show up on the edge, as like a saw teeth around the edge, then you know you've gotten it ground down enough.
Hey, Mike, I have a question. Just to be clear, the grinding wheel is turning and also the micromotor is turning.
Yes, right. That's a good point. You want both of them spinning. They can both spin in the same direction, especially if you have that cup burr at a little bit of an angle. If you have them spinning in opposite directions, that works too. I don't think it really matters too much. They're not going to be spinning at the same speed, but having them both spinning is going to keep it concentric to the shaft, which is what's important.
Okay, thanks.
Good question. Thank you. Let me get a quick drink here. So you guys let me know when you get tired. Or I might get hungry for lunch, but for the most part, let me know when you get tired. All right, so we got in a few of the larger cup burrs. Now we're going to go down. I don't go from 11 to 10. I'm going to skip a couple and go down smaller because they look fairly close in size when you put a number 10 next to a number 11. So it's not worth it for me to do that. It's worth it for me to get that contrast to be a little bit farther apart. So this one here, I believe, is an 8.
Is that tool burning and spinning at the same time?
Yes.
The
It's
first
not-
time I saw this process, the cup burrs were not from the jewelry industry. A friend of mine, Julius Hayden, this is before I was wood turning at all, before I did anything like this. This is back in the early 80s. Julius Hayden made a walking stick with grapes carved onto the side of it. They were perfectly round, beautiful grape leaves. And I said, Julius, I'm a pretty good carver, but there's no way I could carve grapes like that. How did you make that? He took a finish nail and hollowed out the end of a finish nail, the head of a finish nail. And he used that just like we're doing here. And that works. I mean, if you want to make one of these, grab yourself a 7-penny nail. I think 7 pennies is what is about 1/8 of an inch in diameter. And grind out the end of it. Here's one. This was just a blank piece of metal, but I ground out the end of this one. So that's an 1/8 inch diameter cup burr. There's no teeth in it, but it works because it just burnishes those marks in there. It works great. I made a couple of larger ones too out of some old cutters that were dull. Ground those out. The ones from the jewelry industry are nice because they do have the teeth in and they cut a little bit quicker. All right, so I've got more of that size, and now I'm going to go to another smaller size yet. So the smaller the cup burr, the more of them that I put in. Oh, and be careful. Like the first time I was working with these, I opened up the chuck and I grabbed a hold of that and pulled it out, and they're hot. They're really hot. So be careful of that.
Michael, when you ground that nail to, or that rod to get that thing on the end, what did you
Right.
use to grind that?
2 micromotors. So I put the nail or that rod in one micromotor while that's spinning, and then I put a ball, a diamond ball. So there's the
Okay.
cup burr that I made, and a diamond ball that is an 1/8 inch diameter diamond ball into a second micromotor, and then I'm going to hold my fingers together like that. And while this one is spinning vertically, this one's going to spin horizontally. And they, because of the 2 different spinning, they kind of act like a gyroscope and they get perfectly centered every time. But
Okay,
you
great.
need,
Thank you.
yeah, you need to have 2 of them to be able to grind them like that. I don't make my own cup burrs anymore, but I still make some of my own wood burning cup burrs. I guess that's pretty blurry, isn't it?
Yes. There, you passed the focus. Back up a little. There you go.
So that's a cup burr that I use in my wood burning pen, and I have to grind them too. So someone out there is selling round balls that are for wood burning. So what I do is I grind half of that round ball down. So now I've got a half a sphere, and I take a little diamond burr and I grind out the end of that little cup burr, that little half a sphere, to make my own cup burrs that way. And I want to show you that next. Well, in a little bit, I want to show that to you. It's not necessary, but to me, it is necessary. Let me rephrase that. It really makes the work look that much better, I believe. Let's see if we can have some of that. Oh yeah, here you go. So these are spun cup burrs, the larger ones, and down to this size. These are wood burned cup burrs, and they have a different look. They're darker, they're less shiny, and I fill in spaces with that. And I'll tell you what, for me, for my money, that extra contrast just seems to be the way to go. Now, those are not good examples there. Here's some more. So these smaller ones are burnt in with a wood burning pen, and the larger ones, even down to this size, are all spun in with the cup burrs. And to me, they're just the way to go. All right, so we get to that. Now we're going to get to a little bit smaller size. With this size, I'll end up making some clusters, almost like clusters of grapes, maybe. And random means just pick a spot and go there. One of the things I look for, though, is balance in those clusters. What I mean by that is, don't just have clusters here and nothing the rest of this board. Make sure the clusters are kind of evenly spaced. So that's one of the rules of the random rules. Maybe you don't need that, but that's one of the things that I do that makes my work look like my work. When you come up with something, you'll have ideas. And I didn't, the funny thing is I didn't plan on making these random rules. It just ended up being what I do. And what I ended up was actually recognizing that I was making these random rules. Not that I made them, but that I recognized that they were being made. And I'm like, oh, that's right. That's why these look good. Or that's why they look the way they do. The other thing is make sure you go deep enough. If you don't go deep enough, you get a flat spot. I don't know if you'll be able to see that. This one is flattish. This one is flattish. Because I wasn't paying attention, talking too much and not paying attention. So make sure you go deep enough that they're full round. I mean, unless you just want some circles, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can just put circles in. But I generally don't do that. I generally have other ideas. So I want these to be a full round hemisphere. So I'm not going to cluster anymore just yet. Oh, and try to remember to clean your tool before you take it out, because you'll probably forget to clean it the next time you want to go use it. I know I do.
Where do you buy your cut burrs?
Good question. So I get my cut burrs from MDI Woodcarver Supply in Maine. As a matter of fact, we have, between Wayne Edmondson, who owns the company, and myself, we have 2 or 3 different sets with my name on them. And they're just like the ones that I generally use. And so if you wanted to get like a particular set, you can get them from him. If you wanted to get them from me, I would get them from Wayne, and then I would get them to you. So you may as well just go through Wayne. If I do it, I make a couple of dollars, hardly worth the effort, to tell you the truth. If I was coming down to your area to do a demo for you, I would make sure I had a couple to bring in case someone was interested. But generally, I don't worry about it. I'm not really a tool salesman, but that said, that's where I get them from. And he has probably the biggest variety of sizes. But you can go to any jewelry supplier, Rio Grande, Auto Fry, something like that. They generally have the smaller sizes. They may go up to 10 millimeters, maybe. It's been a while since I bought from any of them, but jewelry supply places will have them.
I was just looking on Rio Grande and 2 other places. My daughter makes jewelry.
Okay.
And they only went to 2 millimeters.
Yeah. I think Auto Fry might go up to 10. It's Auto FREI, I believe. But yeah, Wayne has them. He has all kinds of carving stuff. He mostly sells to wood carvers, but he does sell at the AEW symposium every year. We have a symposium locally here in Lancaster, and he comes to that. And I like supporting him. He's a nice guy too. But anyway, yeah, those are places that you can get those. And if you want to make some, like I say, a small diamond burr, round diamond burr, and just grind out the end.
I've put links to all of that in the chat, guys.
Oh, good. Thank you. Get rid of some of that carbon on there.
We're not watching you.
No, you're not, are you? There we go. All right, so I've gone down to probably might be 1/8 of an inch. I don't know what the millimeters are on that. So with this size, I generally make a trail. I make a line. So I'll start from one cluster. And I don't want this to be a straight line by any means. I don't want it to look planned. So I'll go along and then every once in a while, I'll just make a really hard turn just like that. I'm going towards this bead, but maybe instead of going right towards it, I make another turn like that. What I try to do is I try to connect the different clusters with this line. It's just one of those arbitrary rules that I do. They don't, like I say again, they don't really mean anything. That's why I call them arbitrary. But they are, like almost all of my beadwork has these couple of properties. They could be close to another element. Like right here, I got very close to that line. That's fine. That doesn't hurt anything. Now, because of the way I have this, these curves in here, I can jump over that curve and continue on. And you can take that up to the edge. On a box like this box, some of these cut burrs are right on the corner. And that's fine. You can do that. You could just take this cut burr and go right on the corner of a box like that, or a flatboard if you're going to do a flatboard. With the boxes, what I really like about that is I always try to make the pattern go up through the lid. So let's see. So even here, I put one of the larger cut burrs right over the joint. That's a good way to make sure that the pattern stays lined up. Some of the line work goes right up through the lid. This one here, just started on this one, so there's not really much done, but the line work goes straight up over the lid. I just think it's important that you continue the pattern. And you'll notice too with the cut burrs, once you get going with them, and the tool starts to heat up, they cut quicker. When they're cool, they're not cutting quite as quick, but once they heat up, they start doing really well. So there's that line. And you gotta clean this out too. So then I'm going to go with a smaller one than that yet. And I'm going to do a couple more clusters. I try my best not to overlap the beads. And with the smaller ones, it's harder to do that. And if you do overlap, it's not terrible. It's not that noticeable, but I do try not to overlap them. You know, so you don't get like a half a bead somehow or another. So there's a cluster there. And you know, it's fine to leave this little peninsula out there. It's fine to do that. But you can see where this size is not really the whole lot different from that size. And that's why I do generally try to keep the sizes farther apart. You want to keep the tool, the micromotor at 90 degrees to the work as best you can.
Do you know what speed you're running your micromotor at?
Yeah, right now the speed is 40,000 RPM. The the Oz Plus goes from 0 to 40 in a normal mode. Then it has this, I don't know, whatever they call it, but it goes, you push a little button, turn it a little bit farther, you can go up to 50,000 RPMs. You don't want to use that faster speed for the larger cut burrs or any of the larger cutting tools. You want to keep that speed down below 40 for the bigger tools. So just be aware of that. I was using it with, well, the large cut burrs in a hand drill, that's probably 12 or 18,000 maybe. I don't know. It's not that fast in a hand drill, but that works. There are some cut burrs. I have them across the room over there that another company was just starting to make, and they go up to about 1 inch in diameter. Now they're not a full half a circle or half a sphere. They're a much shallower bead. So you don't have to have a 1/2 inch or a 3/4 inch thick piece of wood to use that on. But they are pretty big, and you need to use those in a die grinder, like a big heavy die grinder. They have a 1/4 inch shank on them. And so for some of the bigger work that I was doing, they're really helpful for that.
What kind of brush were you using to clean them out?
So the brush, I've got 2 different brushes that I'll use. A soft bristle brass brush and a horsehair
Yeah,
brush.
no, the one you were mashing the bit down into to
Oh,
clean
right.
the inside.
Yeah, that was a really well-used brass bristle brush.
Brass. Okay.
So if you don't have a used one, you start out with one like this, and it'll end up looking like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just keep using it until you're used up. Eventually, they get to a point where the bristles on here get flared out a lot, and they don't get down into the grooves as well. And so I'll end up, using that to start cleaning the bits out.
Michael, are you going to do any painting today?
I have things ready for paint if you'd like to see some of that.
Oh, I was just curious how, what kind of primer you're going to be putting on it. And
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
All right. Well, I want to do a little bit more with I wanted to show you the homemade cut burr for the wood burner yet.
okay,
And then we'll do some paint.
awesome.
Here we go. Okay. So because we have a fair amount filled in this area, I'm going to do some over here.
Flame on.
Pardon me?
It looks like it's burning flames.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you'll get flames. The reason I have it so hot, you wouldn't have to, but the reason I have it hot is it recovers quicker. If I had it cooler, I'd have to press it in, wait, press and wait. You'll notice that the handpiece is wooden. It's actually Osage orange, and I make these up for myself too. I like the wooden ones because they don't get hot, not like the aluminum ones. So you can see the difference between these wood burn cut burrs. Oh, and you do have to get the ash out of there too. The wood burned ones or pyrography ones, and the ones that are burnt in with spinning friction. I like the contrast. You can fill in a background area pretty quick with this method. And when you're if have an area that are just the larger cut burrs, you always end up with this little triangle. And that burns those triangles in quite nicely. And we want to try to not get a pattern with these as well. It's easy to become a pattern because it's what people do, you know. We tend to do things the same way once we've learned how to do them. All right, so that's that. Now, let me go over to this one. All right. So when we're getting ready to do color, get some of this stuff out of the way here. Probably won't do a whole lot on the color, but first thing we want to do is to put some India ink on the burned surface. So this surface, let me go to this other camera again. So yesterday I put India ink on this surface. The first thing I did, because this is a piece of basswood, India ink is a water base, and basswood doesn't cut as well. So what it ends up, when you put the cut burrs in there, it ends up folding the fibers over a little bit. And you can see how that one's a little bit coarse, maybe. Some of the fibers want to stand back up. I actually did put a sealer on this first and then put the India ink on there. So it's better than it would have been. But anyway, so I like to make it completely black first. And then
What did you seal it with?
I sealed it with Krylon's workable fixative. It's a spray finish. Because of all the the textures in there, I wanted to use a spray to kind of seal it. And it could be, I'm sure you could use a sanding sealer. I know I saw Zinsser has a spray on sanding sealer. You could use anything like that, I think. Yesterday, that's what I had available. So what I'm using is Dick Blick's waterproof India ink. And I put that on with a child's toothbrush. Just a little toothbrush. I scrub it down into all the holes. And I've been using this toothbrush for a ton of years now, and I never clean it. It gets stiff. What I do is I just work the bristles loose and then use it again. It only gets used for that. So then I use golden color and golden I don't know what medium duty. They sell it in different series. This is a series 2. This is series 3. I don't know what that means. I am not a painter. I do like using color, so I put those. I use those colors, and I don't remember who had first told me about those colors. It was probably either Binfo or someone. Maybe it was Jack Vessery, maybe, I don't remember. But anyway, that's what I've been using for a lot of years now. And I think I'm going to continue with that. So I need a little. I got all kinds of things out, and I forgot to get out a little paint palette. So my paint palette is going to be a big old piece of used sandpaper. Let's start with a little yellow. me get a couple of these other items out of the way. Oh, and as far as brushes are concerned, like I said, I am not a painter. I don't really know much about painting. But what I know is I need a stiff brush, fairly stiff bristle brush that I can scrub the paints across that surface. That's what I'm going to be doing. So I've got a couple here. So when I buy the brushes, I go into the paint store, I pick one up and I flick it with my thumb. If it feels stiff, I'm like, okay, that's the one I want. There's probably better ones. There's probably worse ones. But this is what I like to use. As far as cleaning the brushes, I use Windex and water. That was definitely something I learned from Ben Fo. It's this is probably closer to 50-50. I think he was using 80% water and 20%. And I would have mixed that up this way this morning, except I forgot. Got too much Windex in there. So I don't think it's going to hurt to use it stiffer or more concentrated. So what we want to do is we want to get some on the brush and we want to get most of it back off. The problem that most of us end up having is that we put too much paint on, and what happens then is we start obliterating the textures that we did. So when that happens, we fill in the textures and we get less texture. And I tell people you end up with probably 20, 25 coats of paint, maybe more, because I mean, one coat doesn't do much. But that's the point. What we don't want to do is we don't want to fill in the low areas. We want to keep those black. What that does is that shows off all the texture. So it's going to take a while to get the colors built up. And so really just, scrubbing this back and forth on there until you get some colors starting to build up. I don't know if you can see that. That was a little too much paint. I didn't take enough off the brush. All right, so that's some yellow. Yellow doesn't show up real quick. That you got to put a lot on to have that show up. But let's go with an orange. I tend to like bright colors. I did a class out in Erie, Pennsylvania, and there was a guy there that wanted to use magenta. That was a bright pink color. So as long as the colors are fairly close, like yellow and orange are fairly close, I'm not going to bother cleaning the brush because I'm going to take most of it off anyway. But if you're going to go from, say, yellow to blue, you might want to clean the brush first. If you do that, you need to get as much water back out of the brush as possible, because what's going to happen is it's going to be too wet and you're going to be getting too much paint on the work. Now, normally I wouldn't use a sealer on one of these pieces. I only use a sealer on like basswood because it's a softer wood and it tends not to get as nice of a burnish when you put the cut burrs in. And the reason for that is the sealer doesn't let the color pull off the brush because it's not as porous, not as grabby as just having only the ink on it. But I did notice though with the basswood in particular, really raises the grain if I don't seal it. And if you're using a wood that's gonna have the grain raised easily like basswood, then you might want to seal it first, but
Does your Dick Blick ink have shellac in it?
it does have a
Yeah.
sealer in it. Yeah, I don't know exactly what's in it to tell you the truth, but it does seal too,
Yeah.
but just not quite as much.
Another one that a lot of people use is the Speedball Indie ink, and that's definitely got shellac in it.
Okay. Yeah, so you almost don't need something otherwise. But I've noticed with the basswood that I do need to have that extra bit of protection on there. If you're doing a piece like that too, and it becomes an issue, before you put a sealer on it, you can put the cup bar in reverse and press it back down, if that makes sense. It's not the end all, but it does help. Let me rephrase that. Sometimes it helps. It's good to have a couple of these pieces going at a time so that you can put on a couple of coats of orange or whatever, and then put it under a heat lamp and let it dry, and then get another one out, put some paint on, and then go back and forth. Because I think what happens is instead of building up coats of paint, you're just pushing the paint around. And if you were putting different colors on, you definitely want to let it dry, because otherwise they'll mix too quickly. I mean, unless that's what you're into, what you want. I tend to want to just build the colors up from from one level to another.
Can you angle that toward us? We're getting a reflection. Okay.
Yeah, I wonder if that's any better. Is that?
Yeah, the reflection's gone. It's a little darker, but
Yeah.
I think that's better.
Okay. Let's go with a little bit of blue. So instead of cleaning that brush, I'm just going to get another brush out.
Are you going to sell that sandpaper after this?
Jack Vessery was doing that, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, $1,000.
I have not been that brave yet.
This could be your first.
Yeah, I have a piece of cardboard attached to my carving bench, which is where I do most of my painting too. And so that piece of cardboard is pretty colorful. If I take pictures of some smaller works that I'm working on that bench, they have this really colorful background. So I guess that's a possibility, huh? Selling
Hey, works for Jack.
I guess they sell too, huh? I don't know.
You know, the way it started, according to his story, is that, somebody bought one of his pieces and asked for the palette, and he'd thrown it in the trash. So he got it out of the trash and gave it to him, but that put the idea in his mind that it was valuable.
Yeah, yeah. We get so focused on the work that we're doing that we forget about some things and peripheral things that might be just as cool. I have practice pieces all over the shop, and either practice from doing practice carvings, or practice textures, or practice paint jobs or whatever. And yeah, it's just interesting that, you know, these things in the peripheral can be just as interesting to look at. I did a teapot a while back with honeybees. And I'm like, I wanted to do with the honeybees in pyrography, but I wanted to do like 200 honeybees. And I'm telling you what, I worked a full day, full 8 hours designing 7 different tips, wood burning tips to create a bumblebee or a honeybee. There was 2 for the head, 2 for the thorax, 1 for the abdomen, 1 for the left wing and 1 for the right wing. And then all the other legs and antenna and things, they were all done by hand with just like a drawing tip. But the piece turned out really, really cool. It was a teapot with bees on it. It was at a teapot show down in North Carolina, and it ended up being like the most expensive piece in the teapot show. And it was, if not the first piece, but it was one of the first pieces that was sold. I was happy about that. That was very cool.
Yeah.
But what that tells me is that it's worth it to put the time and effort into practice pieces. Get it, especially if you're trying something new. Get a technique down, practice it, make sure you're getting what you want, and then put that on your finished piece. It doesn't always work that way. I spent a bunch of hours perfecting another teapot, a dragon tea, and I still own that one. Got to have the right people at the right time for every piece, I guess. Like I was saying earlier about Fleur Bressler, the Fleur Bressler piece.
Yeah.
Had I known, I'd have made that for her, but just got lucky.
Fleur is still kicking. I think she must be, God, what, 95 now?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Have you ever been to her place?
Oh, many times, yeah.
I haven't been there yet.
Oh, that's a must. Put that on your gotta do right away list.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, it'll blow your mind.
I can imagine it would. I can imagine it would.
After this, I'll send you a couple of links to some of our visits.
Okay. Yeah, she invited me down, and I just didn't take the time to do it.
Oh, it's a must. You've got to do it. It'll blow your mind. We were there. Montgomery and Chesapeake had a joint visit to her place before COVID, so it must have been about 5 years ago.
Okay. Okay. And she's doing okay since COVID?
I haven't talked to her lately,
Okay.
but I saw a picture of her with something to do with the Renwick, the JRA. So yeah, apparently she is.
Oh, good, good. So here in Pennsylvania, we have an event every June called Echo Lake. And it's a collaborative event. And we get, I don't know, 60 artists from around the world coming here to play and collaborate. And then at the end, we have an auction, a banquet and an auction. And we usually have Fleur come up. And since COVID, I don't think she's been up though.
Yeah,
Her and her son would come.
right. Ed, uh-huh. Yeah, Mark Spheri's involved with that too, right?
Yeah. Actually, last year was the first year that he was not involved.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, he retired from the school where we hold the event, and he was looking to get out of leadership role so he could pursue some of his dreams, you know.
Always good to draw a line.
Yeah, sooner or later you got to do that, don't you?
Yeah.
you spend a lot of time and effort in your life doing things for others, maybe you're getting paid or maybe not, whatever. But sometimes you just want to get out there and just do something that is just you.
Looks like you're doing that right now.
Pretty much, pretty much. Yeah. I started in this business as a woodworker, wood turner artist back in 2006. And a friend of mine, wood turner friend of mine, local here, he says, "How do you like retirement?" I said, "What do you mean retirement?" He says, "Yeah, you know, people quit what they normally do and they take up woodwork when they retire. Is that what you did?" I says, "Well, I work more now than I ever did." But I was a stonemason for close to 30 years, and yeah, this is better. All right, well, anyway, there's some color on there. The blue didn't really get very blue. I'd have to put a few more coats of blue, and it's a fairly dark blue anyway. But you can see where keeping the dark spaces really highlights the texture. So yeah,
Have you tried the Josonia iridescent stuff?
I have not. The one thing that people ask me a lot of times, well, how do I get like this really fine detail painting? And I'll show you what I'm talking about. I need to find a really small brush here. So I'll try to keep talking. So I didn't leave you. Oh, here we go. All right. So that piece I showed you with the faces on earlier, this is one of my practice pieces for that. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with those amoeba type parts. These parts. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with those, which colors I wanted to go with them. So this was my practice piece. And I went with something more like that. But also the dots in the center were painted with a bright gold color. So I want to show you how that's done. So this is golden fluid acrylics. This is the iridescent gold. This one's getting a little bit stiff, but it's all right. Put a little water on there. We'll soften it up a little. So we're just going to use a really small brush, and the visors are really important. These kind of visors are really important for this, for me anyway. And what I should do first. So this is just water with a couple of drops of Dove liquid detergent. And what that does, I'm going to spray a little bit of that on here. That, my friend Carol Hall calls it wet water. And it allows the paint to dissipate evenly. And so I think you can see what I'm doing here. So whenever I do those little dots, this is it, one at a time. But I also don't want to fill in the black moat that is basically around this bead. I just want to do 75% of the bead, maybe 80 or 90% of the bead, without getting down into the very low recesses. And that wet water helps this paint to spread out a little bit without getting, hopefully without getting too deep into the groove. And I swear my tongue is not sticking out. Okay. So you can see just those three dots really changes the way that looks. And it just makes it pop. And that's the way this was here. you know, painting all of these beads. It breaks up that blue ocean of color. It gives it a little bit of a little bit of contrast, and then I did the same thing inside of all these little amoeba. All right. So, we have any questions?
Can you tell us again the name of the micromotor you use?
Yeah, the name of the micromotor is Oz Plus. It's made. There's another name on there. It's Saeshin, Saeshin. And I looked it up. I think it's made by the same people that make RAM products. It's just a higher end version of their RAM product. And as a matter of fact, I have been seriously considering selling my NSKs and buying another Oz Plus instead. The one advantage that the NSK has, and in the 80s and 90s, if you had asked me, I would have said just get the NSK. They are the best tool out there, and they still are a really good tool, which is one of the reasons I'm not just getting rid of it, just out of hand. But this tool here at $600 or $650 or whatever it is much more torque at about half the price. I think the NSKs are close to $1,200 or $1,300 now, and this is less than that. But the one thing that the NSK has that I love is they've got an on-off switch right on the motor, so I can turn it on and off without having to reach over my desk to the controller unit. So the controller unit is this. I just unplugged the back, but so the handpiece is a little heavy. Doesn't bother me at all. Some people say it's too heavy. I don't like to use it, but I'll use it all day long, and I don't notice it being an issue at all. NSK does make a high torque motor, but I think they're up closer to 1,600, maybe. I don't know, a lot more than the Oz Plus. But yeah, it's a great tool. This box actually looks a lot like the NSK. I mean, they look almost identical, different colors, but they almost look identical. Maybe they're even made at the same factory. Who knows? I'm not sure. Yeah,
Mike,
go ahead.
have you tried a foot pedal?
I have a foot pedal for my Fordham tool. I don't like it.
Okay.
Matter of fact, I actually bought a dial speed